So my name is Nieamatallah Abrahams, better known as, or affectionately, I suppose, as I said, known as Nimi. Um, I grew up all my young life in Wynberg, born here in 1967, um, and I lived opposite the Lakshorama in Mars Road. So that is before the area got built up a little bit. From our front door, you could see straight into Park Road, into the Lakshorama. And at that stage, right at the back of us, the wash house was still very much there. I think it was in the 70s that the wash house got demolished, but it left a lot of open space. Often jumped over the back wall right into the park, and that was young life really. I attended Douglas Road Primary School. So the walk from home to school was something like about 10 minutes at most. And I must say that because of the area structured the way it is, I actually didn't even know that there were other people outside of Wynberg. You know, being a young school kid, we were entrenched in terms of being a Muslim school. And honestly, with the mosques around and everything else around, I didn't even know other religions existed. To be honest with you, so I mean, the other important thing is that the principal of Douglas Road Primary School was a family friend of ours. So you can imagine how close that was in there, because you're going to school and the principal is the uncle that visits you at home, visits your parents rather at home from time to time. And it was a very comforting young life, in that part of Wynberg. I did what I think other young boys who do, played soccer and swam. That was the kind of thing for boys in Wynberg. If you didn't swim because the pool was there, then were you really part of Wynberg. I played soccer for Bluebells, like again most others at my age did. There's nothing really much more in terms of my primary school life. And the reason why I kind of almost ring-fenced that is because thereafter, I almost see it as life began. When I went on to high school, I went to South Peninsula High School. Many of the Wynberg kids would also go to South Peninsula. Those who don't go to Witboma, you'd be going to South Peninsula. But all of a sudden, life began to be a little different. The Witboma railway station was all of 35 minutes from the house. Jumping on the train and going 2 stations, that was exciting. Traveling by train to Steerhof station and then walking up to South Peninsula School. But the important thing is getting to South Peninsula and going into an assembly and saying our father was something foreign, totally foreign to me, because all of a sudden another religion kind of came into play. And then also, coming into contact with what we then got taught as white people, because you walk through Steerhof and, these things start conceptualizing. It was 1980 by the time I arrived at high school. It's at the time where unrest, in fact, school boycotts became something. 1976, I know we were at primary school ducking under tables when sirens went off and all those kind of things, but it really didn't resonate at that stage yet. Only when you got to high school, it started making a little bit more sense now. My eldest sister was in matric in 1976. My younger sister was in matric in 1980. That's when I arrived at high school. And it's there where I met a very good friend, lifelong friend, who was at Methodist Primary in Wynberg as well. We both landed up there, Sean Atskins. And I had a love for swimming. And the school year began, and the swimming gala, in fact, took place. And there I went off to go and swim in the gala. I came in on 3rd place at that stage. And what had happened was that Sean, in fact, noticed me. When Sean, in fact, saw me coming in at 3rd place in the gala, he said to me, "Listen, don't you want to come swim in our gala, man, in Scouts?" I didn't know what Scouts was about. I've never heard of Scouts before. And only after I joined Scouts did I realize that my father was a Scout. Dr. Gurmud from Wynberg was running a group, 3rd Wynberg Scouts, was a Muslim group, but they seem to have fizzled out and died out probably somewhere around the 50s or early 60s. So by the time I came about, it wasn't there. And so there I went off to this group of young boys meeting on I think it was a Wednesday night we used to meet back then. And we met in Innes Road. Next to the youth center, there was a little annex, a small little, almost room, so to say. We met there, and I started my journey in terms of Scouts. I love the outdoors, so things kicked in and it started making sense. Went to the gala, and they got first place, was like thrilled, over the top in terms of that. And that is really where my life started taking a bit of a different turn in Wynberg. I love my youth years in scouting. I'm part of church parades, me who didn't know anything about the next religion, all of a sudden walking into a church with a flag on a Sunday morning and being part of all of that. And I went on, and my journey in scouting, in fact, which started there, was quite, and is still quite a colorful one, in that I went on to become a Springbok Scout and a level above being a Chief Scout. So really achieved much in terms of that. In the meanwhile, life had gone on. I changed schools from South Peninsula. I went to Cressway, subject choices and the likes thereof. And again, the funny thing at high school was that between Sean and myself, Mr. Morat was the principal at South Peninsula. We used to do August deliveries in the afternoon, and Mr. Morat is the one person that we delivered August to, and we kind of alternated. So it's very funny, you're delivering the principal's August, and we had a very good relationship. A little bit of playful, but very good relationship with the principal of the school. Like I said, I left there at the end of then Standard 7, now Grade 9. I left there to go to Crestway, subject choices that I wanted, and made a whole lot of new friends over there. So from a scout perspective, I was the only Muslim kid that was in this group, the scout group over here, and it was challenging at times. There's a lot of respect, especially when it came to things like Ramadan and the likes thereof, your friends, or everybody wants to share in the buka stuff and then those kind of things. But there was a lot of respect around it as well, and my understanding of Easter, for example, and Lent and Christmas and the likes, those things all grew. And thereafter, I carried on, finished matric, and I went to study at Wesley College of Education, became a teacher, and I actually went to go and teach at Harold Christie High School, in fact, for 13 years thereafter. In that time, I got married, and I moved out of Wynberg at that stage. In fact, before I really moved, just before I got married, or just after I got married rather, my dad passed on. So we got married in June, and my dad passed on in September. My mom and dad had a hardware store in Strand. My mom actually worked at Kismet hardware down the road, and she went on to, in fact, have they got a hardware store going in Strand. And my dad and, in fact, mom were going to move out over there, and they did it. So for 6 months, I actually moved with my mom and my new wife to the Strand. So my dad passed on, and my mom had a business. Dad and mom had a business in the Strand, and I then, with my new wife, went to go live in the Strand for 6 months, commuting in and out from time to time into Wynberg. And at that time, I started teaching. I was teaching at Harold Cressy. But Wynberg was still obviously where youth development was taking place. So I, in fact, took a very short break from Scouts, and I recall. My grandfather was very involved in the Castletown Road Mosque, and had bought tickets for the food fair. So I went to the food fair, supported it as one normally would, went to the food fair, and at the food fair, a lady by the name Ajira Inos, in fact, pointed me out and said, "Hey, speak to that guy about Scouts." I then went across to the Vigilance, where first Western Scout group was meeting. Now, me being that close to the Vigilance, I said, no ways, there's no ways. I would have known, because of my involvement in Scout, I would have known that they're there. And I didn't, in fact. And I went there. The guy that was running the Scout group was from Salt River, and he traveled from Salt River to Witboom every Friday night by train. And when he realized that I had the ability to run this, he said, okay, guys, you sorted out 9. He was gone. And there I was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks in, and I started running this scout group. That was first Witten Scout Group. And I went on running the scout group until 1999, in fact. We were at the Vigilance. We had some good engagement with Park Road Mosque. We did some meetings there, which was really awesome to, in fact, integrate. And then... we moved from there eventually to, I think it's Balper Road, is where the bridge is up on the upper side of Wynberg. Under the bridge, the council, in fact, had a venue over there, so we eventually moved into that venue. That was the development of Muslim scouts within the Wynberg vicinity. Even though it was called Witten, it drew a lot of kids from Wynberg, and we got the youth going. Now, you can, if I backtrack to, what was it, 1980, 81, 82, I was the only Muslim kid there. So this was really a bit of a dream come true, and an investment within the community over here with kids that never had that exposure. Remember, I said around about, I think, early 70s or late 60s, the third Wynberg group died out. But this was a kind of almost a resurgence of that, which was really great. And you know what? One wants to see diversity. You don't want to have scouting, for example, only within the Christian community. You want it all over the show. So this was really great in that regard. In 1999, I actually moved away from the Witten group, and I got taken in by what is known as the regional structure, so kind of a level up in terms of that. So this I must say was, it's 1999. We're 5 years after the 94 vote. We're into this democracy. Things should have changed and the likes thereof, but we very much were still within our little bubble over here. And I got, in fact, pulled up into this regional structure, and all of a sudden you really got involved with what we'd have called the people on the other side of the line, what I'd almost call I saw then as big scouting, because all of a sudden you now got Pinelands and Milnerton and all of those guys, and what we were doing in our little backyard is only about 20% compared to what these guys were doing. And again, my involvement, even though it was at a regional level, I still had one hand in Wynberg and what is known as the Constantiaberg district, which is around all the groups around here, including Kenilworth and Wynberg, and down to what's called Naruna in the lower Plumstead area, and Plumstead Scouts and Plumstead Scouts down at Gilray. So we still had, as much as the racial divides were dropped, people were still kind of in pockets all over the show, and slowly started integrating as it went along. I did about a 10-year stint in the role, and I ran the scout program across the Western Cape. So I moved from the group, and I was involved in or taking charge of the scout program across the Western Cape. And again, coming out of the background that I came, you wanted to ensure that there was representation, that there was diversity, that the colored community, in fact, was equally represented on that platform, that it wasn't just for privileged kids. You very much break away from the apartheid lines, but it's still there, and you want to do something to really, really break it down. So there I was in that role, and overseeing scouting across the entire region. Again, coming back into Wynberg, making sure that things are supported, that the Wynberg groups themselves can actually, get going. I further went on from myself. I went on and I headed up adult training. Again, started seeing Muslim adults come through and actually really develop to be able to, in fact, pick things up. The Witten group, in fact, then became the mother group to subgroups. Witten went along. Belvedere, in fact, was a group that developed out of Witten, and they, in fact, they now meet in Chakra Road, just off Chakra and Holderness Road. Ottery was a group that sprouted out from there. Now, these are all, again, predominantly Muslim groups. I was one Muslim scout involved in scouting in this area in 1980. Scouting in this area is now predominantly Muslim. Okay, I'm not saying I brought it about. Don't get me wrong. All I'm saying is that is in fact how the growth has happened, and which is absolutely great. And when one talks about scouting, what are you really talking about? You know, my big outcry back then was that the guys that are not the guys that's on the corner for conversation, and I'm talking about the guys that simply loaf. They got actually nothing to do, so now they just hang out over there. The guys that come to the corner to come have a chat and connect, that's cool, that's really cool. But the guys that actually don't know what to do with their lives, they just lay around over there. I was always very concerned about that. No, whether you play soccer, that's great. Whether you're swimming, that's awesome. Playing netball, but when you're not doing anything, that's when then the kind of the drugging and the other kind of things start happening. And scouting was one of those avenues that the youth could go to where good values, in fact, was inculcated. So I've always had this very hard drive to, in fact, get that kind of thing going. Now, whether if I was soccer crazy and I did same thing over there, same thing. It doesn't really matter what it is. But that's why it was important to, in fact, get the youth involved in these kind of things. I went on from the position I was overseeing the Scout program, and again got drawn back into the area around about 2016, in fact. Very much so. So I've moved to, lived in Heathfield, and then I've moved to Fairways, and I've stayed there for many years. And at the end of 2016, early 2017, a guy by the name of Ahmed Solomon. Ahmed actually lives in Prince George Drive. Ahmed, in fact, got involved in a project called Scouting in Schools. And that is really to take, through a government project, managed to take scouting to the underprivileged in schools where the government pays for the program to run. And up until recently, I headed up that program. So from 2017 until earlier in this year, I was heading up that program. Ahmed was a project manager, and we've in fact managed to ignite scouting for 2,880 kids in schools across Mitchells Plain, Khayelitsha, Gugulethu, and now as far afield as George. And again, I go back to my point around the fact that now we've got skills that we in fact imparting with these kids, leadership skills we kind of develop with them, and you're saving that child from actually just not going anywhere in a good way, going, idling around. So that is an awesome program that we managed to initiate. It also then gave initial jobs to people between the ages of 18 and 25, so under the youth bracket, through the Job Skills Fund, and they in fact have a stipend. They get into the program for 1 year. So by the end of that year, they got a CV, they've been through some interview training, they've developed some sort of record in terms of the fact that from an employment perspective, and it's easier for them then to in fact move into the workspace to find a job. So my day job is that I run a number of call centers. I work for the Merchants Group. I run a number of call centers, and it's crazy how this on this side, which is a volunteer thing, how that feeds across, because once these guys have done a year on this side, we look for people. So we cross them into that space, and we get them employed. And then just recently I actually had been promoted to the position of regional commissioner, so I oversee the entire Western Cape, and report into the national structure. So in my care, all the way down to Plettenberg Bay, down on the coast, and up on the west coast, overseeing scouting. So a Wynberg boy from a little school in Wynberg called Douglas Road that has, alhamdulillah, I'd say, managed to in fact have influence over scouting right across the entire Western Cape. It's good to in fact sit here and say, this is my roots. I'm from Wynberg, in terms of this. And it's a good story, I believe, when you say, there I was, that only Muslim kid in that group. And with the respect of I call my brother scouts there, with the respect of those guys and nurturing me, if I can flip back to a little story which I remember, my parents were pretty staunch, I believe, and good. And the scouts had a competition, and it was in Ramadan. Now, in 1983, I qualified to go to the World Jamboree in Canada, for example. Like qualified, ready to go and everything. And then when you obviously don't apply now and go tomorrow, you apply months ahead of time. My father eventually checked the calendar and said, hey, hang on, that's happening in Ramadan, no, you can't go. So I had to turn down that opportunity. But here was an opportunity at a little camp called Gilray down in Grassy Park, and they had a competition in Ramadan. And I convinced my parents that I can get to the mosque in the morning, and I can, at Buka time, I can go back to the mosque, and all those conditions in place. Okay, fine, you can go. And you know what the beauty of that is that the way the competition was structured, the guys had to work right through the night. And they said to me, no, hang on, you go sleep at around about 3 o'clock. I said, you go sleep, get some sleep in. And by the time I woke up, now I had to eat obviously before Fajr. So by the time I woke up, I think it was something like 5 o'clock. And I think it was a little bit later than Fajr was, but of course 5, quarter to 6 was Fajr. So at 5 o'clock, when I woke up, those guys made me breakfast already. These are my Christian brothers in Scouts. And then we fed me and everything else, and I went to the back fence, and they made a little human bridge on their backs to jump over to get to mosque in time. And then they said to me, when you come back, just whistle at the fence. And they did the same thing to me, bring me back in. And that's the beauty of it. Even at the time of iftar, that they were around and said, no, we're not going to eat. We're making the food. We're all sitting together. We're eating with you. And that's the beauty of brotherhood. And these are all the guys at the Wynberg as well. So, yeah, that's my story really, in terms of my involvement in youth and youth development. I really hope to see, now that I can have even more influence, I hope to see even more development in Scouts happening in Wynberg. Mohammedia Primary School has a Scout group going with them now, which we piloted in 2017, I think. There's a big influence in terms of Wettenheer, Belvedere, but I still believe that there's so many youth that can do the program out of Wynberg. So we will be doing more work in Wynberg to try and actually encourage that kind of thing. But that's about my story and my involvement of Wynberg.